Hello, college football fans. It's Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Today is a busy, somewhat tricky day. As I'm doing the show live, Kirby Smart's also just down the road from me, along with some Georgia players as part of the 2018 SEC Media Day. So some of today's show is sort of a real-time reaction to the things that Kirby Smart is sort of speaking in the moment. And for those of you that watch the video after the fact, not live, you watch it later on the afternoon, the night, you may actually end up knowing more about some of the stuff that Kirby says than I do here in the moment. But we're going to cover it all kind of as it happens. Jeff Sentell later on. He's actually in the building with Kirby here today, so he's a good guest to have as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All here on this Tuesday. But we've also got some fun stuff to sort of squeeze in as well. We are fully loaded, in other words, as DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, begins right now.
From DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
This does not happen much on our program, but every single now and then we kind of bump into an issue. We record this show live every day at 10 a.m. For those of you that are watching on video right now, thanks so much for being a part of it. For those of you that listen on the radio, listen in podcast form, you hear this sort of after the fact from when we record it live. And normally 10 a.m. is a really good time to be doing the show because we're not really conflicting with anything that's usually going on for Georgia. Every now and then we kind of bump into something, and today's one of those days where, as I'm doing this show live here in our palatial DawgNation World Headquarters studios, Kirby Smart and the Georgia players are also a part of SEC Media Days going on right now there at the Omni College Football Hall of Fame there in downtown Atlanta. Nothing too consequential coming out of that thus far, but we are kind of following this live as it goes on. So for those of you who listen to this show sort of after the fact, sort of an on-demand feature, or if you listen on the radio or we're time delayed a little bit for the noon hour there on 960 The Rev, you may know more about what Kirby Smart and the Georgia players are saying than we do right now, but we're going to kind of react to everything that we can get on this, and we'll sort of sprinkle that into our regular conversation. By the way, yeoman's work, I believe that's the right use of the phrase, right now from Chip Towers, Mike Griffith, they're on the scene for DawgNation. Already a lot of stuff popping up there at the DawgNation website, DawgNation.com, about some of the things that Kirby Smart's had to say today. I thought that Mike Griffith had a really interesting piece already this morning on Kirby's reflections on Demetrius Robertson. Obviously, you know, making reference to the NCAA eligibility issue that Robertson's going to go with here. Kirby not really giving you a whole lot on that necessarily. I guess I did sort of notice that it doesn't seem like he's using his bully pulpit to petition here maybe as strongly as he would have for Maurice Smith back in 2016, but we'll talk more to Jeff Sentell about that in just a couple of minutes. Probably no surprise here that in another piece that you've seen at DawgNation.com, Kirby Smart saying that really no chance of Justin Fields redshirting here this season. I think this is a twofold deal. I think because Kirby's seen enough from Fields to know that he's ready to play, at least in some form and capacity here in 2018. I think this is also an issue where Georgia just doesn't really have another viable backup. So Fields is probably good, but even if he wasn't, he's likely the best option for Georgia at the backup quarterback position. So maybe no surprise there from Kirby Smart on that. And in a piece that, as I'm speaking here, a few minutes after 10 a.m. was just filed to DawgNation.com, Chip Towers referencing some of the things that Kirby Smart's saying about Nate Patrick and D'Angelo Gibbs, two of the players whose status for the upcoming season uncertain. After Kirby Smart speaks, that status still a bit uncertain here, but certainly there's a sense of optimism among the player contingent there for Georgia at SEC Media Days. J.R. Reed, D'Angelo Gibbs' cousin, along with Jonathan Ledbetter and Terry Godwin, they both seem to strike a hopeful tone about Gibbs and Patrick's return. Kirby Smart pumped the brakes on that just a little bit. We're going to have Jeff Sentell on the program in a few minutes, and Jeff will kind of give us his first-person perspective. He's been in the room there with the Georgia players and coaches, or I should say Georgia coach Kirby Smart, all day long. We'll find out from Jeff what he has to say about what Kirby had to say when he joins us as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All. We'll also do some recruiting stuff with Jeff. And speaking of recruiting, let me transition over, kind of shifting gears out of clutch here, to a recruiting topic just for a moment, because it has been busy for Georgia on the recruiting world here. Another commitment yesterday as Warren McClendon was added into the fold. Warren McClendon, of course, a big-time offensive tackle from down in Brunswick, Georgia. And there's a story to be told here about why McClendon really matters to UGA. And to do so, I need to kind of go back to the spring here for a moment. Kirby Smart was talking during spring practice about kind of maneuvering some pieces around the offensive line Kendall Baker had been starting at left guard. Baker was kind of moved out of that spot. Solomon Kinley was sort of sliding into that left guard spot. And in the midst of sort of describing why that was, Kirby Smart said something that's very relevant for us right now in terms of how this 2019 class for Georgia is coming together. I want you to hear Kirby Smart from April, and I want you to see if you can listen for the phrase here that makes the Warren McClendon story potentially important for UGA, and everything else that happens for this 2019 class also crucially important. Listen to Kirby from April, and it'll set us up for where we're going today.
The move there that everybody's trying to make a big deal about, we're getting another tackle ready. So we're taking Kendall Baker and allowing him to work at a secondary position, no different than a corner might have to play safety, or a safety might have to play star, or a tackle might have to play guard. I mean, Kendall Baker, we're trying to see, is he our best left tackle? Is he our second best left tackle? Is he our best right tackle? Is he our second best right tackle? And most teams in America are guard heavy. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we've got those edges secure, and that's just allowed us to get Solomon and Ben more reps, along with Trey Hill and Torrey and those guys.
Did you hear that phrase that Kirby Smart uses there, guard heavy? Kirby says most teams in America are guard heavy. What he doesn't say but insinuates is that his team is guard heavy. And I think when you bring recruiting into this, it's also probably a little bit true as well. Georgia had great success recruiting the offensive line in 2018. But when you think about guys like, with the exception maybe of Cade Mays, who looks like he's going to be an offensive tackle, but when you look at Jamari Salyer and Warren Erickson and Trey Hill, these are interior offensive linemen. Georgia, that was already maybe a bit guard heavy, brings in some elite interior offensive linemen for the class of 2018. And you can sort of say that right now, Georgia's deeper on the offensive linemen than it's probably ever been. But in comparison to the interior guys versus the sort of the outside edge guys, the tackles, it's pretty clear that Georgia is a lot deeper inside than it is outside. It's maybe a bit guard heavy, as Kirby Smart used that phrase when talking about Kendall Baker and Solomon Kinley, and Kirby's looking to train some tackles currently on the roster, and I think it's safe to say that when you look at offensive line priorities for the 2019 class, definitely looking at guys who really project to be true offensive tackles. That means in some cases, higher-rated players have, for whatever reason, kind of been ignored, because I don't know that Georgia necessarily thinks, Sam Pittman necessarily thinks they are true tackles. You look at Xavier Truss that Georgia recently added. That's a big, huge guy, long arms, tall frame, already well north of 300 pounds. That's a guy that projects to be an offensive tackle. And the latest addition for the 2019 class for Georgia and the offensive line, Warren McClendon, also one of those guys. Speaking of McClendon, who made this official yesterday, he puts this out on social media. I believe for those of you watching, we can show you the tweet here from Warren McClendon saying, "I'd like to thank God for blessing me with the opportunity to play at the next level. Thank my parents for supporting me through the recruiting process. Also, my coaches and teammates. With that being said, 100% committed to the University of Georgia. #GoDogs," and he gives you a signature there at the bottom. This is a guy that for Georgia, Warren McClendon, looks to project to be a true offensive tackle. He's 6'4". He's already well north of 300 pounds, and he sort of fits into that mold that Georgia seems to be going after right now. These really big, big offensive linemen. Truss was that way when they brought him in from Rhode Island a couple months ago, and the same thing with Warren McClendon right here. They are prioritizing, even at the expense of smaller, more highly rated players like, say, Wanya Morris. They're just going after these big guys right now. That's something that apparently is pretty important for Georgia. Although I guess at a attempt to be fair and balanced here, it's also worth pointing out that in the past, when Kirby Smart's talked about this issue, he sort of downplayed the significance of just how important truly big offensive linemen are. He says other things are maybe just as or more important than size, and I guess as a way to be sort of equal time, fair, and balanced, I will remind you that Kirby Smart has sort of pushed back on this notion before. Here's Kirby on that.
Size doesn't excite me. What's inside that helmet does. First time I saw Isaiah win, I didn't exactly get excited, but I was pretty disappointed when he left. So it was not it's not a matter of how they look all the time. It's a lot more about how they play. And I guess if you asked every defensive lineman that Isaiah faced in the season at SEC, they would say that Isaiah Wynn was one of the fiercest competitors, physical guys. Our defensive line didn't want to go against him. They love going against Ben and Isaiah Wilson, so they can get up under them. So it's not a matter of size alone. I think the size obviously gives you the ability to stay in front of the quarterback, keep people off, but your bend and your flexibility and the power you create is a lot more important than your size. So those two guys they're in position battles. I mean, just like a lot of guys out there. There's no starting offensive line in my mind. There's some good young players out there that are competing with older players.
So I think that's interesting from Kirby Smart. He says, hey, listen, there are some things more important for size than when it comes to offensive linemen, and yet it's also fair to point out, while he may say that in one breath, when you look at the actions on the recruiting trail, Georgia is just not recruiting small offensive linemen right now, smaller than the biggest players available. It seems like Georgia's really prioritizing that size right now, which sort of brings us back to the guy that Georgia just added, Warren McClendon. We'll talk to Jeff Sentell more about McClendon here in just a moment, but what seems to be obvious about McClendon, even though he isn't as highly rated as some other offensive linemen that are out there, the size that he brings to the table, I think, has a chance to be a really nice boost for UGA. This has already been a pretty popular player on the recruiting trail throughout this process here over the last couple of months. He made it official yesterday, and it sounds like Dog fans and a lot of close observers of the program think he's a really nice piece to be in the fold here for 2019 for Georgia. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Marco's Pizza. Thank you for being with us. Whether you watch us live at 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, DawgNation YouTube, the DawgNation Twitter feed, we're glad you're there for that. On the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or in podcast form. Kind of the on-demand feature for the show. You can do it on the Apple devices, the Google Podcast player there for the Android devices. You can listen straight on SoundCloud. Many of you have downloaded the SoundCloud app. Or you can check us out on the world-famous DawgNation.com. We're just glad you find DawgNation Daily here today and invite you to say hello primo with Marco's Pizza's great offer. 2 medium, 2 topping pizzas for just $6.99 each. This is an awesome deal on authentic Italian quality pizza made every store, every day the Italian way. And my advice to you is, with these 2 medium pizzas, now you can do whatever you want, but get one pizza with a couple different toppings and another pizza with another couple toppings. That way you can sort of sample from both boxes. I think that's a fun thing to do this time of year. Either way, you'll love it. And if you haven't tried it yet, go to Marcos.com. You can find the Marcos nearest to you and take advantage of 2 medium, 2 topping pizzas for $6.99 each. That is an incredible value on some awesome pizza. Marcos.com for more on that. All right, it's Jeff Sentell here coming up in just a moment. We got a lot to do with Jeff, including his presence at SEC Media Days in downtown Atlanta. We'll find out from him a little bit more of the details about what Kirby Smart is saying about some of the big issues surrounding Georgia football. But before that, I think this is really fun. LSU coach Ed Orgeron had his turn at SEC Media Days yesterday, and you're probably aware that Georgia goes to Baton Rouge in October for one of those really circled games. Dog fans really excited about the trip. Dog fans really excited about the showdown. LSU at one point in time, if you want to go back years ago, looked like it was on the verge of becoming a big rival with Georgia. These teams played, 3 times in SEC championship games? The loudest I can remember Sanford Stadium back in the first decade of the new century was probably that 2004 showdown against the defending national champion LSU when Dogs clobbered them there that day. I remember that great atmosphere. Get goosebumps even thinking about the crowd noise that day. And that time, it looked like Georgia and LSU were heading for a great rivalry, and it didn't really materialize. The presence of Saban in Alabama probably changed that. The emergence of Urban Meyer at Florida probably changed that a bit too. But these 2 teams get together here for one of those rare meetings coming up this October, and Ed Orgeron has a bit of a warning for Georgia, kind of in a good-natured way, but I think it only sets the stage to make us excited about this game against LSU. Here is Ed Orgeron from yesterday's SEC Media Days telling Georgia and its fans what to expect from Death Valley when these 2 teams get together in October. Take a listen to this.
Obviously, Kirby's done a great job with the Georgia Bulldogs. Tremendous team last year, tremendous recruiting classes. They're going to be a very tough opponent to play. But that night, Tiger Stadium is going to be alive. It's going to be loud. There'll be a lot of tailgating. It should be a great college matchup in the SEC.
Yeah, listen, I've got no problem with Ed Orgeron on that. I mean, I think it does make that game seem really fun. I do think it's going to be a great atmosphere and a pretty good test for Georgia. And as we get closer to that game, the more I start to wonder, maybe there's a chance that LSU is just a little bit better than I was going to give them credit for. Maybe there's a chance that they may actually, it's still a game that I think Georgia wins, but in terms of maybe being an opponent that fans ought to respect, maybe there's some reasons why LSU is maybe a little bit more worthy of respect here this season. I've kind of given them credit for on that, but we'll talk more about that later on the show. For now, I want to also mention one more thing before we bring Jeff on here. I think that last year, Kirby Smart having the success that he had has kind of set up a scenario where it's almost going to be really tough for SEC coaches going forward to live up to the impact that Kirby Smart was able to make in just 2 years at Georgia. Kirby Smart took a Georgia program from 8-5 in his first year, kind of a disappointment, kind of a lackadaisical finish to the 2015 season, and by 2017, Georgia's in the college football playoff. Georgia is heading for a national championship. Georgia's the reigning SEC champion, and I think there is a degree to which when a lot of programs around the SEC see Kirby Smart having that kind of success, they look and see, well, how can we duplicate some of that? And I think we saw an example of that at SEC Media Days yesterday. And I tell you what I want to do. If you don't mind, I want to hold that topic for a little bit later on the show here as well, because I don't want to shortchange that. I think there's something that happened at SEC Media Days yesterday that just goes to show you that Kirby Smart's success is making things, I think, a little tougher on some of the other coaches around the SEC. We'll talk about that coming up here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza. The reason why I'm pushing that back for right now is I want to get ready to welcome in Jeff Sentell to the program as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All here on this Tuesday. Jeff has been at SEC Media Days all day long today. He's heard from Kirby Smart. We'll get his thoughts on that. I also want to follow up with Jeff about something we talked about on Saturday when he joined us for our special announcing Demetrius Robertson's commitment to UGA. Jeff seems to think that D-Rob's got a chance to win that eligibility appeal with the NCAA. We'll find out more from Jeff on that. So it's going to be a busy conversation as a part of this Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All on Tuesday. It's actually Jeff's first appearance on here on DawgNation Daily and more than a week after his vacation. So it's going to be fun. We're glad you're with us as a DawgNation Daily presented by Marco's Pizza rolls on right now. It looks like we'll get Jeff here coming up in just a moment. We're tracking him down there at SEC Media Days. I'm sure he's trying to find a good spot to get in for the phone call. So give us a couple minutes or a couple seconds here to get Jeff up on the phone. But as I was saying, timing constraints, I didn't get to finish the full topic I wanted to a moment ago. I'm just going to push that back to later on. But you're going to hear in just a few moments from Texas A&M coach Jimbo Fisher on something that he said yesterday, eerily similar to something that Kirby Smart also talked about at the end of the season. And I think the success of Kirby is a pretty big shadow that a lot of these new SEC coaches are dealing with. We'll talk about that coming up a little bit later on. For now, though, news on recruiting. Update from what Kirby Smart has said at SEC Media Days. It's a busy conversation. We love doing it on Tuesday. It's our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All. Hope you enjoy Jeff Sentell right now. All right, we'll get Jeff here coming up in just a couple of moments. I thought he was ready to go, but we'll get him coming up in just a couple of moments. While we're doing that, let me just get some comments here. Go ahead and drop those into Facebook and YouTube. Get those ready to go, and we'll chat with you about anything you want to talk about from the show. I am curious to find out what some of y'all think about what Ed Orgeron had to say. I think it makes the game more fun. I think it makes it something to look forward to. I do think, even to a certain extent, this may sound weird to say, but to a certain extent, Georgia fans, I think, are maybe anticipating being tested a little bit. Let's find out what this 2018 team is made of. And the fact that you do go on the road here within the first, 5 or 6 weeks of the season 3 times, right? You're at South Carolina, at Missouri, and then probably the biggest test of the 3 at LSU in relatively early October. That's 3 pretty interesting road tests in that first half of the season. That's a real chance for Georgia to prove something. And I think that Georgia fans are as curious about that as anybody else is. Obviously, there's a huge sense of anticipation for the upcoming season, but finding out how good you are in these, rabid environments, these significant road tests, Orgeron's setting that up for yesterday. I think it's kind of fun. Scott Harris says Ed Orgeron's going to be in the hot seat after our game. It's going to be a repeat of Butch Jones from last year. That is, pretty interesting if you think about Georgia going around about that same time of year to Knoxville a year ago. Georgia hammering Tennessee on the road to the tune of 41-0. I do think made things very tough for Butch Jones, even though he would hold on to his job for a few more weeks. It is kind of funny that you could have the same kind of thing going on, because remember, for Orgeron, who, as the commenter mentions, his status is not rock solid right now. Before the game against Georgia, LSU already has the neutral site game against Miami to start the season. They're on the road at Auburn relatively early in the year. You've got some real challenges there in terms of what LSU has to deal with before it gets to Georgia. So that becomes one of those scenarios where Orgeron could be on kind of shaky ground before you get to that point. That's a very fair thing to bring up. Matt Rukavina says, I remember the last time we went to LSU, we put up more than 50 points. Is that 2008? Is that Georgia's last time in Baton Rouge? Why, has it really been that long? That's amazing. Amazing. But a great conversation, Matt. Thanks for adding that comment in. David Hemansky talking about the Zach Mettenberger era at LSU, that great game from 2013? Is that 2013 when LSU came to Georgia? Another loud environment. You've had really loud environments for a couple of these LSU trips to UGA. So I think what Orgeron said yesterday is fun. Yes, it probably throws a couple logs in the fire for the game, but listen, we're itching to get going with some football here, so Orgeron kind of helps us with that. All right, we got Jeff Sentell ready to go here. He's downtown in Atlanta. He has been there part of the SEC Media Day so far today. He's also going to deliver the Marlowe's Tavern tell-all to us right now. We're glad he's here. We're glad you're here as well as DawgNation Daily rolls on.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, we got some very serious business to take care of with Jeff Sentell here, both in terms of recruiting and in terms of what's happening there at SEC Media Days in downtown Atlanta today. But I do have to start by saying here as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, what a great time it was last night. And if you're watching, I want to show you this on the screen here. The entire DawgNation staff getting together, where else, the Marlowe's Tavern in Midtown Atlanta last night for a great dinner. I think we have a photo we can show you here of the DawgNation crew right there in front of the Marlowe's in Midtown. You see some of the famous names like Mike Griffith and Chip Towers there in the forefront. You see Jeff Sentell standing next to me, Andrew Astleford, who you've come to know and love as a part of the Good Morning UGA and teaming up with us in the podcast every day. BJ Swinney, Michael Carvel in there as well. Some of the folks who make the trains run on time around here at DawgNation. But what a great night it was, a little team building exercise at the Marlowe's Tavern in Midtown. I had the Kansas City strip steak. Had a little bit of that great new IPA from Scofflaw Brewery, the Marlowe's Tavern Blindside. Jeff, it was a great meal, and I know you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, man, it was a very good time. A few Southern charmers were definitely in the room at Marlowe's Midtown. And it's funny, the crew I hang out with, guys, you try to eat right, you come back from vacation, and you get ribbed on for ordering the tuna salad, man, the ahi tuna steak, man. That's the world we live in, I guess, huh? Yeah,
listen, I mean, you are much healthier than basically really anybody else in the DawgNation team. I'll give you credit for that. You know, we've joked with you before about, not putting the veggies not putting the meat on the pizza and the things like that. I mean, you really lived your gimmick 365 days a year. You are much, much healthier, certainly than I am. I mean, I can only aspire to your level of health.
Man, I appreciate that, Brandon. But everyone has their own degree of fitness that feels good to them, and goodness gracious, please don't paint me as some sort of health freak, fitness martyr, or anything else like that. I just need a lot of energy to kind of cover ground the way I do and to try to do this job I do the best of my ability.
Well, speaking of that, you, in addition to the recruiting work, have been with Kirby Smart and the Georgia players at SEC Media Days in downtown Atlanta here on this Tuesday. I was telling the audience before you joined us, it's one of those tricky days where as we're doing this show, some of this stuff with Georgia has also been kind of going on as well, and we've tried to cover this the best we can in terms of what Kirby Smart has said. Let me deal with you with a couple of these issues, and then I want to kind of cram a bunch of recruiting stuff into the second half of our conversation. Let me start with Demetrius Robertson first. When you joined us on Saturday when we announced the transfer of Demetrius Robertson, or when we covered the announcement from D-Rob himself, I guess is the better way to say that, you really struck a hopeful tone for Georgia fans that D-Rob might actually win this appeal, get the hardship, and be eligible here in 2018. After hearing Kirby Smart talk about this today, has your opinion changed on that, either one way or another?
I think the best thing to say there, Brandon, is maybe just to kind of carry the banner that I guess Kirby Smart did today when meeting with the media. He basically said that it's out of his hands. If anybody can correctly predict what the NCAA is about and what their rulings will be, especially when it comes to something outside of money and their fiscal interests for the NCAA, I think a lot of us probably just be throwing darts on a dartboard. I just think with D-Rob, a lot of the players were welcoming to the team today. It was basically under the umbrella of another great athlete, another fast guy, another great guy to help Georgia to play with. And Kirby was kind of matter-of-factly. He's glad to have D-Rob on the team. Demetrius will help Georgia. But he has no idea about the waiver, and the petition here is a waiver for him to be able to play immediately. There's a hardship issue there because he needs to transfer closer to home for family reasons. But the other thing for D-Rob, which I guess sparks up those embers of hope a little bit, is what might be seen as in the best interest of the student athlete. Who has that proper definition? It doesn't really matter. All that matters is the NCAA's definition. And the thing there with Demetrius is the NCAA will have to look at it and say, is this the right thing to do for the student athlete, to have him sit out all but 2 games of 2017 and then sit out all of 2018, especially when he's moving back closer to home to continue his football career?
So what I think would be kind of interesting, Jeff, is to kind of go back in time to 2016 and kind of compare some of the things that Kirby Smart said publicly at the time, maybe about Marie Smith or whatever, because it seems like there was more of a petition for rule change. I know a lot of that came from Marie Smith's mom back then, but it seems like Kirby Smart probably politicked on this issue a little bit less today than I would have expected him to. Do you agree with that?
Well, there's a big reason, Brandon. The big difference there is that Coach Smart is really big about immediate eligibility for graduates. That's a huge sticking point for him because he makes it clear about how hard it is for somebody in their first 2 years of college, the acclimatization to just college itself, time management, taking care of your own business, much less trying to be a contributing member of a national championship contender type football team. And maybe the reward for getting your degree in certain time is to be able to go where you want to go as an immediate transfer, as a graduate transfer. Demetrius isn't in that boat. He's a guy that's going to have to he reported to Cal right around June of 2016. So a lot of ways to go for him in terms of getting his degree. I think the main narrative with D-Rob is, of course, he's going to help Georgia. It's just going to be a matter of when. And there are a couple cases like that everybody can read about. Florida's got a guy trying to get immediately eligible. Duke had a guy that they just got immediately eligible who transferred from Ohio State. So those are things to watch. But I know I said this on another show yesterday, Brandon. It just seems like the Demetrius Robertson narrative is always going to test the dog fans' patience, like a 6-year-old child. It was the whole Cal, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, and then it was Cal, and then he's transferring. Will it be Georgia? And then he chooses Georgia. And the immediate next question is, when can he play right away? It seems like there's always going to be that next hot-button question when it comes to Demetrius Robertson eventually playing for the Red and Black.
It's our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All. We enjoyed Marlowe's last night for the brand new spring, summer menu. Y'all enjoy that as well. If you check out the Marlowe's Tavern closest to you, I am talking about that Blindside Marlowe's Tavern exclusive IPA made in concert with Scofflaw Brewing Company. You want to check that out. Jeff is saying he was enjoying that Southern Charmer, a great sort of bourbon themed cocktail. Jeff also had one of the Blueberry Bucks, which is kind of one of the standard cocktails there at Marlowe's. The flatbreads are back, by the way, at Marlowe's here for a limited time. We enjoyed several of those flatbreads. We had the appetizers really flowing last night, Jeff. Right? I mean, that's about as many appetizers I think as one table could enjoy last night. We had that. We had the firecracker shrimp. We had just about every kind of appetizer you could have. We had it last night at the Marlowe's in Midtown, right?
Well, I think it's meant to say on the menu it's for the table, I believe, and I think we had like Sam Pittman-sized collection of appetizers. They were big and they were great, and everybody couldn't wait to see them.
Yeah, multiple orders of the shrimp and crab nachos. It was all really good stuff. All right, coming up in a few minutes, Jeff, I want to ask you about the 2 latest additions to the 2019 class for Georgia. I'm talking about the defensive lineman Zion Logue and the offensive tackle Warren McClendon. Let me do a couple more things on SEC Media Days, though, before we get there. I've also heard tell here during this morning session that Kirby Smart is essentially completely put to bed the notion that Justin Fields would redshirt here in 2018. That's not a surprise to me for 2 reasons. First of all, I think Smart's seen enough from Fields to know that he's good enough to play, and also Georgia just doesn't really have any, viable backup options other than Justin Fields right now. What was your take on what Smart has said about the quarterback situation here today?
Yeah, I don't know, Brandon. I'm going to kind of count me in the church of, like, the water is wet when it comes to that. I mean, to me, with the new redshirt rules, the fact that Georgia's a national championship contender has to have the backup ready to play, much like Jake Fromm and Jacob Eason last year. I just think that's a given. I don't think that's news. I know everybody wants to resuscitate that storyline. Lot of takeaways from what Kirby has said so far today. Like, one of the things he said is he believes he's not sure if he has 3 first-rounders on the team, maybe not in 2019. But he thinks he's got the most competitive 100 110 group that he's had so far in Athens in terms of the guys 1 through 100 on the depth chart, trying to earn time this fall for the team. Not so enamored with the redshirt rules. He kind of made it clear that while fans and others and media types really just hone in on, is there a plan? Can you play this game, that game? Really, the coaching staff keeps it very simple. Does the young man work hard? Has he earned the right to play? And can he help Georgia? That's the main things they look for in terms of their two redshirt or not redshirt plan, even with all these new rules. It's just very interesting. I think, Brandon, one of the things about the media days is you kind of go to different rooms to try to work on the stories you're trying to work on. I think I've heard the how bad does the national championship game loss sting question about 19 gazillion times. And we also, unfortunately, had a reporter start off the day asking Kirby about what's it like having Jacob Eason, Justin Fields, and Jake Fromm on the depth chart at Georgia. And that wasn't a good look for the media tribe when one of our brothers opined with that question in the main room here at SEC Media Days at the College Football Hall of Fame. You know, lots of other things to talk about. The players have an interesting little competition to see who could dress the nicest, dress the sharpest at SEC Media Days. You know, J.R. Reed's got some fabulous sunglasses from New Orleans, of all places. Jonathan Ledbetter has the Gucci shoes. All the players also wanted to wear bow ties. They asked Kirby Smart today, hey, man, what's up with the bow tie? Kirby's like, I didn't get the memo. And he thought they were sharp, but we also learned some more breaking news, maybe in the same vein of Justin Fields will play right away, and that is Kirby Smart is not a fan of bow ties.
Yeah, I don't like bow ties either. I don't like bow ties either, Jeff.
Fine for other guys, but Kirby did not seem enamored with wearing the bow tie on the sideline or definitely wearing the bow tie at SEC Media Days.
Yeah, no, I think Kirby Smart would look like a barbershop quartet member if he was wearing a bow tie, so I'm kind of happy that he goes away from that. All right, let me do one more thing on Media Days, and then I want to get the latest commits. Chip Towers got a story up at DawgNation.com about what Kirby has said about D'Angelo Gibbs, Natrez Patrick. Their status still uncertain, but there's kind of an interesting contrast in the way that Kirby talks about this and the way that J.R. Reed talked about his cousin D'Angelo Gibbs and the way that Ledbetter and Godwin seemingly sort of weighed in on this. The players themselves seem fairly optimistic here about the status of Patrick and Gibbs, but Kirby Smart did not want to go there. Did you come away with more knowledge on the uncertainty surrounding Gibbs and Patrick, both guys who could be significant contributors for UJ were they able to play? Do you know more about them today than you did before the morning began?
Well, I think what was said and what was intended, or what you kind of gathered from a lot of the questions and comments was the head coach said what he's supposed to say. He says those guys are on the team, they're working hard. Still needs to see about eligibility, when they might play game one. The coaching staff, led by Coach Kirby Smart, is definitely in the mode that those young men still have a path that they have to follow, doing all the right things continuously, weeks and weeks, months and months, all through fall camp to earn the right to kind of get back on the field for Georgia. The players, on the other hand, they have a much more hopeful, much more optimistic way of looking at it, because that's one of their teammates. That's one of the guys that they bleed with, that they sweat with every day. J.R. Reed was very, very hopeful. He thinks D'Angelo is walking in the right path. He thinks he's matured a lot at Georgia. They spent a lot of time with Roquan Smith over the summer. A lot of people don't know, but J.R. and Roquan Smith were roommates at Georgia. And the main thing about J.R. was he's hopeful that D'Angelo Gibbs can knock the rust off, get back in playing shape, and come back and earn that spot, that star spot at the University of Georgia. Sounds like he has a lot of confidence in his cousin, as he probably should.
Let me do a quick follow-up on that, Jeff, and then we'll change the subject to something else. It seems like we lump these two guys together a lot. Patrick and Gibbs, their stories seem somewhat similar, but their circumstances are actually probably a little bit different. Do you think that one of these guys is more on the path than the other, or is it just too easy to tell, or too early to tell that yet, in terms of if one guy is ahead of the other in terms of being back in the good graces and ready to go by summer practice here?
Yeah, that's really tough, Brandon. I think maybe the other way to look at it maybe is which one is closer, or which one is more advanced in there. I don't know whether it's penance or maybe the better word there is just measure of accountability. I think one of those guys is probably to try and say which one or the other is kind of a hard thing to do right there. I think it's also more of a matter of which one of those guys actually, they both know that they have a lot of things to do. They have to do things the right way. They have to do things the Georgia way in order to get back on the field for Georgia. And any hiccups for either gentleman would probably not be taken well for their futures at Georgia.
All right, let's talk some recruiting here. That's normally the subject of our Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All, and we do this every Tuesday here on DawgNation Daily. You were in Lebanon, Tennessee on Sunday as the three-star defensive lineman Zion Logue made his commitment to UGA official. You explained on your video on Facebook Live, which I'd invite folks to check out, that the three-star rating for Logue kind of comes before some added weight gain here. He's a little beefier than he once was. I mean, for a lot of Georgia fans who, it wasn't that long ago that Logue even got a Georgia offer. So a lot of us, including me here, are playing catch-up pretty fast on who Logue even is. Why don't you introduce us to the young man here?
Yeah, I think the thing with Zion is, like, a lot of things is, the recruiting industry, by and large, do a very good job when they have data, when they have things to evaluate, when they get looks, whether it's camps, whether it's ball games, whether it's showcases or whatever. Well, Zion is a kid that has basically rebooted his recruiting. He was probably 6'6", 6'5", 245 when he ended his junior season. Now he's all the way up to 6'6", 290. Big time wingspan. You see things about him, and you're like, obviously, to be an edge guy, more than likely an inside guy, 3 technique and 5 technique that will stay on the field for Georgia against high tempo offenses that can run or throw. An adaptable type player. And I think the main thing with Zion is that I knew Zion, especially getting into his body. He's another one of those former middle school quarterbacks. He told me he could probably still throw a football about 60 yards. Still runs about a 5 flat in the 40, even though he's put on about those 40, 45, 50 pounds. And I think the thing for him is Georgia and a lot of schools, Alabama, Tennessee, Ohio State, they saw a different player. And it's one of those guys, when you see a kid, it doesn't matter how raw he is, when you see a young man that's 6'6", about 290 pounds, that can move the way he does, has the length that he does, those are the type of guys that belong in a Power 5 major college football program. And I think Zion is a guy that fit the bill for Georgia and certainly some other schools as well. And that's, you look at him and the stats say, if you just go by his ratings, he's the only 3-star in the class now for Georgia. And he's the only guy, and he's the lowest-rated guy in the class. But I think right now he's probably that high school student that probably has an incomplete right now on his grade because he's turned in a lot of makeup work or turned in a lot of new work. And I do expect whether it's finally the creation of the Bulldog bump or the Georgia bump by the recruiting rankings, I think maybe by the time his senior year completes itself, I wouldn't be shocked to see him as a 4-star prospect.
What you're describing to me sounds a lot like Devontae Wyatt, and you could sort of tell me if that comparison rings true for you or not. But, Wyatt was also a guy that was very athletic for his size. He was known for his speed. You say Logue played some quarterback. Wyatt played, I guess, some running back even for his high school team. It certainly sounds like, Wyatt kind of overlooked by some of the recruiting services for a while, maybe Logue kind of the same way. There's a little bit of a Devontae Wyatt comparison here, right?
Well, both of them are big, freakish type athletes. I think Devontae's more of a compact type guy, 6'3", maybe 300 pounds, a lot faster than Zion, especially in his first few steps. Remember those stories about Devontae Wyatt and his Air Force Ones running 4.7, cracking 12 seconds in the 100 meters. I think Zion's more of a guy. He's still going to try and play some tight end for his high school this fall at Lebanon, Tennessee. So he's a guy that I just think, versatility, adaptability, find a place for a raw product like Zion. I think that's where he fits really well. 6'5.5", 6'6", he's about 290 pounds. That's the type of guy that lots of programs are looking for on the defensive line because there's not a lot of those guys in the SEC.
So Warren McClendon, the final name I want to ask you about, he also commits to Georgia. This is a guy that you have sort of told us about here now for a while, and to me, what I said before you joined us is this feels like a duplication of the Xavier Truss story of Georgia's going after big guys they believe are true tackles. Is that the blueprint here for what Sam Pittman saw in Warren McClendon?
Well, if there was any doubt about it prior to the opening, I think Warren validated that going against some of the top guys in the country, not shying away from reps, even against the likes of Nolan Smith. Lots of the very top players in the country, Kayvon Thibodeau. So there's a lot to like about Warren. And to me, he answered the question about is he a flex guard tackle? No, I think Warren is a true tackle in the SEC. He's a guy that has kind of been for a while Georgia or South Carolina. Sam Pittman was always huge in his recruiting as well. And I think the big picture for Georgia fans to look at is maybe are the Bulldogs done on the offensive line recruiting? I think Clay Webb might be a name that Georgia would take no matter what. But does the class go from 2 to 3 offensive linemen? Might just be a 2-tackle offensive line class in 2019, depending on how the Bulldogs do at other positions. And I'm sure everybody saw the Sam Pittman video yesterday. Another way where he's trying to inject glee into everything with a yes sir. This time he brought a Bulldog along, so I can't wait to see what the next thing he's got in his grab bag of trip.
Yeah, can't wait to see that either. And would invite you as we say goodbye here to Jeff Sentell. Last night the DawgNation crew had a great time at Marlowe's Tavern. If you're looking for a place to hang out with your family and friends and really enjoy a great meal, Marlowe's Tavern, the place to do it. It's our Marlowe's Tavern tell-all every Tuesday here on DawgNation Daily. Jeff, thanks for spending some time with us at dinner last night. Thanks for being here on our program today. We'll look forward to catching up with you later in the week. It's great to have you back stateside again after a busy vacation. For you, a fun vacation, I hope. And we will chat with you very soon.
All right, guys. And, hey, I'll go back to the Intel tomorrow. I had this Media Day stuff to get through today. And I look forward to sharing a lot of stuff I've learned over the last 4 or 5 days.
All right, looking forward to that, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Really fun to have Jeff Sentell here on DawgNation Daily. Great info from Jeff. Really solid stuff. And, of course, we love that every Tuesday as a part of the Marlowe's Tavern Tell-All right here on DawgNation Daily. We got more on Georgia coming up in a moment. Let me transition to the SEC Through here for right now. And SEC Media Days continues. Georgia not the only SEC school a part of this today. Georgia's essentially probably wrapping up by now as I'm recording this live during the 10 a.m. hour. But you got 3 more schools to come today. You got Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Florida. Obviously, of those 3, Florida will be the one that Georgia fans pay the most attention to. And, we'll have more on Florida here in a moment as part of our SEC Through. But, we had Steve Spurrier last week who's like, I think that Florida can really contend with Georgia for the East. And my point on that is, and I've said this before, good. Let them think that. I hope that Florida comes strutting into the SEC Media Days today and talking about how different things are going to be with Dan Mullen at the helm and how improved they're going to be. I'm sure they'll be ringing that bell about the strength and conditioning program. That's the talking point they seem to have been married to this offseason. Let them do that. I'm speaking, of course, strictly as a fan here. I like the idea of Florida puffing itself up and then Georgia taking a needle and popping that balloon come October. I just really like that. This is a rivalry that's important to me. I think it's fun for fans to rally around it. I think it's important for Georgia to kind of keep that measuring stick in the division. Florida, despite the fact they don't have the most talent in the division other than Georgia right now, are still the better overall barometer of how well you're dominating the division. So hopefully Florida thinks they can make it a game in Jacksonville in October, and hopefully Georgia can prove them wrong once again. So Dan Mullen will speak later on today. Ole Miss and Arkansas will speak, and I think there's, for those of you who've ever been to SEC Media Days, you know what I'm talking about here. Most of you probably have not. Most of you don't care to go. But when you go in there's just a certain way that coaches kind of walk through the room there, where, some of them just sort of have the look of an SEC coach. Mike Johnson and I talked about this last year. Will Muschamp walking through that hotel lobby last year. He had gone from looking like the career assistant, which he had been for many years, or a head coach at Florida, still had the look of being an assistant. Last year when you saw Will Muschamp sort of walk through the door, boy, he looked like a head coach. He looked a lot more senatorial or presidential. I mean, he just sort of had that distinguished, dignified look of a head coach. He's sort of grown in that role. I think today you're going to see a couple of guys who are going to try to fill that suit, try to fill that role. Matt Luke from Ole Miss, Chad Morris from Arkansas. Morris has been a head coach. Luke was the interim at Ole Miss a year ago. But I just don't know. I don't know that they quite have the look yet of being a head coach. And if you're a fan, you want your coach to sort of look the part. You want him to kind of look like he's in charge and the most important guy in the room. And, I don't know that Luke and Moore is going to come across that way. So that'll be something worth paying attention to with these guys going. The other three schools going for SEC Media Days today there, along with UGA as a part of SEC Media Days in Atlanta. Let me talk about Tim Tebow for a moment. I thought this was really interesting. Tebow weighed in. He's not able to be at SEC Media Days because he's still playing minor league baseball, but he was on an ESPN broadcast, and he was asked about his thoughts on the Alabama quarterback situation, and he talked about the fact that maybe Alabama plays Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts together, that Hurts becomes kind of a H-back, running back, wide receiver combo type thing here. Tua Tagovailoa, obviously the quarterback. Somebody brought up yesterday that I think it's a really interesting point that, this is something that Tebow did not want to do in the NFL, and yet he's asking Jalen Hurts to potentially do this in college. I wonder if that could possibly work. I think that Hurts is athletic enough to maybe play a different position. I saw enough of him in that national championship game when he was running with the football. He really looks like an athlete when he runs. But could he ever be happy changing positions? If he's going to stay at Alabama, that may be what he has to do. I'm not even sure that Hurts is better than Mac Jones, who right now would be the third-string quarterback. A couple other SEC stories to get to. I mentioned Florida before. Martez Ivey is the left tackle for the Gators, the potential anchor for that offensive line, and really potentially one of the team leaders. He was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. He has been a starter, but not a great player for Florida, and yet he's talking, according to some quotes from 24/7 Sports, about how he doesn't want his final memory of a Gator uniform being a 4-7 season. He wants to be thought of as bigger and better than that, and so he's coming back for that final year to do just that. And it's part of that big talk from Florida that I mentioned a moment ago. They really believe that Dan Mullen can resurrect something that Jim McElwain was not able to do, and I am very curious to see if that indeed happens. I'll also mention this, kind of closing out. Torrey Gurley is a former South Carolina player, and he goes on the Paul Feinbaum show last week, and he guaranteed a South Carolina victory over Georgia. Now, I said yesterday, what do I get to take from him if he's wrong? Because if I don't get to take something from him if he's wrong, that's not a guarantee. He's misusing that word there. But some of y'all were mad at me because I didn't talk about this last week. Honestly, I didn't think y'all would care. I'd never heard of Torrey Gurley. I have no idea who this is. He goes on the Feinbaum show and says it, but some of y'all were like, B.A., you have got to talk about this. This has got to be a topic. This guy's lost his mind. And I don't know. I mean, he played for South Carolina. What else would I expect him to say there? But some of y'all were mad at me for not bringing it up, so I am bringing it up. A guy that I've never heard of thinks that South Carolina is going to beat Georgia. In fact, he's guaranteeing it, but he's not putting anything of his own on the line, so it's not really a guarantee. So, this is, I guess, another example of the fact that Georgia fans they're getting excited about the season. Orgeron saying what he said, Gurley saying what he said. There's a lot of build-up for this 2018 season, a lot of key road games where Georgia fans have already got the date circled. We'll look forward to watching those play out. We'll make that your SEC through. Okay, so let me go back here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, to something that I was trying to talk about kind of near the top of the show and just sort of ran out of time on. I think that Kirby Smart, his success last year, continues to be a problem for new coaches into the SEC. Kirby Smart essentially wrecked the curve for those of you that have been in college classes where the grades are given out on a curve. Kirby Smart sort of wrecked the curve in year two. He got to the SEC championship, then won the league, got to the playoff, almost won the national championship, and many people were saying, well, Kirby Smart, are you ahead of schedule? Are you doing this faster than even you thought was possible? Kirby Smart was asked that 1 million times, and every single time he gave some version of the same answer. This idea of a timeline, this idea of some sort of framework for when success is supposed to happen, that never meant a hill of beans to him. Here's an example from December from Kirby Smart.
I've repeatedly said the same thing. There is no schedule for winning championships. So the objective is to get the most out of every team that we can. And that's what we tell our coaching staff every week. Our job is to prepare them to be the best they can be in the game to get the most out of them. Then at the end of the season, we look back and we say, did we get the most out of this unit, this team that we possibly could, withstanding injuries, withstanding circumstances that you can't control. And that's what we'll do at the end of this year, and then we'll do the same thing the following year. But I think everybody wants to say that this is the schedule. There is no schedule. The only thing there is what you have and what you do with what you have. For us internally, we want to do the best we can with what we got.
So that's Kirby Smart talking there about sort of wrecking the sort of typical schedule for achievement with his great success in year 2. And now there are a lot of other new coaches in the SEC who in some form or fashion are being asked to kind of do the same thing at their new jobs. A guy like Jimbo Fisher, even, for instance, who was a national championship winning coach at Florida State. But he was sort of asked the same kind of question yesterday of how quickly can you make this happen at Texas A&M? And while I would never be able to pretend to know what Jimbo Fisher's actually thinking when he speaks these words, but listen to how similar they sort of sound in some respects to what Kirby Smart was sort of asked and had to answer a lot last season. Jimbo trying to do the same thing that Kirby did a year ago? Well, here's his version of the same kind of topic.
Your timetable's now. You want to win immediately, and that's your place. But is that realistic? I don't know. It's all about the process of putting things in place because you want to build the program the right way up and get kids to understand and buy in. But I'll say this, our attitude of our players has been tremendous. I've been very proud of that. I mean, they've come in, there's a lot of change. We do things differently. Not that the other side was right, just a philosophical difference, and the way they've handled it has been tremendous. So, you don't ever know. We went to Auburn that year in 1993, and Alabama was defending national champs in 92, and they come off a 5-6 team. We went undefeated, so it can happen quickly. At LSU, it took 3 or 4 years. At Florida State, it took us, I think, 4 years to do it. I don't know. It could be. You don't ever put a timetable on things because you can't judge people. You don't know how each guy's going to respond and what's going to happen in the chemistry unit, the camaraderie unit, and your coaching staff. So hopefully we're going to do it as quickly as we possibly can.
I think that Jimbo Fisher used a really interesting word there. He used the word realistic. And I think the problem for Fisher and Dan Mullen and Jeremy Pruitt and I guess even Chad Morris to a certain extent, all these guys who now take jobs the year after Kirby Smart and his second year of being a head coach put Georgia in the college football playoff, the definition of what realistic is for new SEC coaches may be skewed a little bit. Now, this is not a problem that Georgia has to worry about. It can bask in the success that Kirby Smart's enjoyed. But for the rest of the SEC, Kirby Smart's shadow leaves a lot for them to live up to. All right, as we wrap up here today, let me do a couple things. First of all, I mentioned throughout the show, Ed Orgeron talking about the atmosphere for the LSU game for Georgia. Torrey Gurley, the former South Carolina player, saying that he guarantees the Dogs are going to come to Columbia and get upset by South Carolina. It really sets the stage where a lot of these Georgia games for the 2018 season are already starting to get a good bit of hype. So on video with our live commenters and on Twitter at DawgNation Daily, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on our Dog Day Q&A. Which of Georgia's 2018 games right now to you seems the most concerning? Is it on the road at LSU? Is it on the road at South Carolina? Is it Auburn, a game that takes place in Athens, but a bit of a revenge game given the fact that Auburn beat Georgia in the regular season a year ago? Love to hear you weigh in on that as part of our Dog Day Q&A. And I'll also talked a little bit about Florida a moment ago. We believe that Georgia fans are supposed to be Gator haters, and 102 days from right now, Georgia beats Florida again. We'll see you tomorrow. And right here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Marco's Pizza, we'll look forward to taking a lot of your comments right now on pretty much anything you want to discuss, the Dog Day Q&A, or really anything else. You can kind of weigh in on that. Pete Williams says that South Carolina will be a challenge here this season. Pete goes on to say, but I think we love a challenge. We'll get the win. Kirby doesn't want he says Kirby doesn't want to lose to his buddy Muschamp. The thing that Pete says that I think is the most interesting, and I actually sort of mentioned this a moment ago in our sort of comment interlude before Jeff joined us, that he says, this is what Pete says, I think we love a challenge. I do think that's true. I think the Georgia fans, as weird as it sounds, I think they want to be challenged. I think the Georgia fans believe they have a good team, that they believe that Georgia has a good team, but they want to be tested in a way that actually kind of proves it. You don't have Notre Dame this year. You and I guess maybe even 2017, you didn't know that Notre Dame was maybe the true test that it turned out to be, a pretty salty little team there. I think they hope that South Carolina is good enough to both validate the Georgia resume and just give Georgia a chance to show what it's all about on the road at LSU, kind of the same way. I think that there's a weird thing here where obviously Georgia fans want to see the team throttle its way through the season, but they want to see some of these opponents be good enough to matter. They don't want to have to listen to these ESPN talking heads sort of criticizing Georgia for playing too soft of a schedule. They want to see some of the opponents rise up, be good enough, and then see Georgia meet that challenge and prove that it's replenishing its departed talent from a year ago. I think that's well said by Pete on that. James Crump says he loves the idea of Smart putting pressure on the other new coaches in the SEC. Yeah, I mean, Jimbo didn't talk about Kirby by name, but you better believe that it's on his mind. You better believe that that's the new standard. And, listen, we'd be doing the same thing here, on DawgNation Daily and, Georgia fans all over the place. If Georgia had a new coach and another new SEC coach had won the league in just a second year, we'd be doing a million topics on this program every day saying, how can Georgia's new coach be just as good as, whatever that coach was that just won the league? We'd be doing the same kind of conversation here, right? It's just a natural fact that when you see that success somewhere, the natural tendency of fans is to say, why can't that be us? Why couldn't we do that right here? And so that's only natural that A&M is going to go through that, that Florida's going to go through that. Even Arkansas, who we don't think much about, there's no doubt that's part of this. Chad Clark brings up an interesting point. He says that Kirby Smart had more to work with than most. Give Rick a little credit. That is a really good point, Chad. That when you start thinking about, the comparison to Jimbo at Texas A&M or even Jeremy Pruitt and Dan Mullen at their respective SEC East schools, Mark Richt did give Kirby a little more. Now, I don't know that the Richt roster in 2015 was as talented as some people thought it was. I think he had some real holes there, especially at key positions like offensive line. But it was certainly not a bare cupboard, not a bare cupboard at all. Casey Cochran echoing something that and listen, I hope y'all give me credit for this. When y'all bring this up, I always validate this point. Casey says it again. It's worth saying. This is the time of year, talking season, it's called, where, predictions are sort of cemented. And Casey says, it's funny how last year everyone said the Dogs are 1 year away. Look out for them in 2018. Then we have a great year. Now they say we lost too much talent. We'll take a step back. Haters. Y'all, I think that Casey, and we have somebody says some version of that comment every single day. And I've told you before, I think it's absolutely spot on. I do think it's a moving of the goalpost, a sort of, mincing of words. I completely agree with that. I don't know that Georgia should be considered the best team in the country for 2018. But I do think that some of the same people that were saying, maybe not much in 2017, but wait till 2018, all of a sudden have somehow downgraded their opinion of 2018 because 2017 was better than they thought it would be. There is a weird narrative around Georgia. I don't deny that. I think that Casey's absolutely right about that. Good comment. I've gotten better about managing these Facebook comments, but they still pop in this feed really weird compared to how they used to. So I'm kind of jumping around here on a little bit of this. Stephen Burton, the soon-to-be married Stephen Burton, says, we desperately need some retaliation. He is referencing, and y'all got to stay on me about this. The honest truth is we've had a lot of crazy stuff going on behind the scenes here. Some housekeeping and house cleaning we've had to do around here. And so that's not an excuse. Please don't get me wrong. It is not an excuse. I am derelict in my duties as the DawgNation Daily host for not taking care of these T-shirts better than I have. But there is a reason. I'm not just flippant and disregarding you. I have kind of been. I mean, some of y'all may have noticed I haven't really been on Twitter at all in like a month. I've just been kind of busy. But I got to slow down and take care of our T-shirts. So I promise that's coming at some point in time. I really apologize for being a disorganized mess. But I'm at least transparent and authentic. I hope what you don't get on the one hand, hopefully you appreciate on the other. Over on YouTube, DSGB27 says, I hope that Zeus is 100% when the season starts. Me too. I think there's a chance that he will be. Travis Nunley says about the lack of great offensive linemen from Mark Richt. He says a true freshman played offensive line over Richt seniors. Yeah, Richt did not recruit the offensive line well enough. I mean, I love Richt. I think he's revered. I think you ought to have something named after him. Not the stadium, but something. I think that Richt ought to be a significant part of Georgia's football history. But, there's a reason why Georgia was, kind of bumping up against that ceiling. And offensive line recruiting was one of those big reasons. Brian Kephart says, every year we always hear USC talk up the Georgia game because we are their biggest rival in the SEC. When they lose, they seem to lose confidence for the season. It's just another business day for the Dogs. He says it's going to be a W. And, yeah, I mean, I've kind of brought this point up before, too. And, many of you could care less about gambling lines, and I'm not really a betting person really either, but I do follow that market because I do think it's sort of a check on our hot takes, gamblers and line setters put their money where their mouth is, so I'm at least going to listen to them a little bit. And while, we sort of treat this South Carolina game like it's, the clash of the champions here, Vegas has Georgia as about a 15-point favor right now. To Las Vegas, to people who have to be level-headed because money's on the line, they view this as just another road game for a top 5 team. That this is not some colossal mountain to be climbed. This is just some, foe to be vanquished here. So, Muschamp has been good, though, in these moments as a double-digit underdog at home. South Carolina's covered under Muschamp a lot there, so maybe he finds a way to keep it closer than the experts think. But as of right now, Georgia's thought to be much better than South Carolina. Adam Sire says, why no one talks about James Cook? I don't know that James Cook does not get talk. I think that James Cook actually gets a lot of talk. I think that there is probably a natural curiosity. You got 5 running backs. You can't play all 5. So let's say there's no injuries here for a moment. Who is that odd man out going to be? Is it Cook? Is it Harrion? Could it possibly be Holyfield again? Someone's not going to get enough carries. We don't yet know who it's going to be. Obviously, with 5 running backs, the chance of keeping them all healthy for an entire season, not great really either. So maybe injury changes some of that. But I wouldn't agree, Adam, that no one's talking about James Cook. Based on what I see in the comment section, there is a lot of chatter on him, and we've even led some of that. When Cook sort of officially became eligible, for instance, we talked about that here on the program. We think he has a chance to be really good. Andrew Kelly says, hey, BA, tuning in on my 31st birthday. Andrew, that's awesome. I haven't missed an episode of DawgNation since I found you on Facebook a couple years back. Keep up the awesome work. Go Dogs. Andrew, first of all, happy birthday. I hope it's a great, great time. 31 is an awesome year. I hope you enjoy every single minute of it. And I really appreciate what you said there, that you've watched us on Facebook every single day like that. You have no idea. And for many of you who are kind enough to let me know the same thing, I really, really, really appreciate that. This show for me is so much fun to do, and it's the relationship that we form together, even though I never really meet that many of you face to face. But this part of the day where we get to chat back and forth like this, I wouldn't trade it for $1 million. I really wouldn't. So Andrew, it's really nice that you would say that. Thank you so much. Over on YouTube as well, 404 Dog for Life says, if Demetrius Robertson plays, I think it's a sure that Hazelwood stays a lock, being that we'll pass the ball more. That is an interesting take. That if Robertson plays, it's more passing plays, and Jaden Hazelwood's going to look at that and say, you know what? I believe next year I'm going to be running those same routes, catching those same touchdowns. I like that from 404. Good stuff there. Jay Bolton says, what did Orgeron say about Georgia? We played the audio near the top of the show here today, simply talking about the fact that he thinks that the atmosphere for Death Valley is going to be really intense for the Georgia game. It's fair to point out that he was asked a question about it. He didn't just sort of bring this up out of nowhere. But he was talking about how intense he thought the Death Valley atmosphere would be for that game. And listen, I got no problem with Orgeron on that. I'm glad he said it. I'm glad he feels that way. I'm glad the LSU fans are excited about it. Let's get together and have a good football game. That's my idea on that. And it just gets me ready for it. I think many of you feel the same way. We are late. We got to go here. Let me squeeze in a couple more comments before we do. Daniel Moore says, if Georgia holds on to Jaden Hazelwood and Dominic Blaylock, those are the two 2019 5-star receivers, that'll be 3 5-star receivers in one cycle with the addition of Robertson. Has that ever been done by any school at that position, 3 5-stars? I don't know about for one cycle, and I guess for Robertson, he wouldn't quite count the same way because he's joining the team now. He may not be eligible to play till 2019. But what I did find, Daniel, is if you want to go back to 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, if you want to go back over the last 5 recruiting cycles, there have only been, not counting Georgia yet, because Blaylock and Hazelwood haven't arrived yet, but not counting Georgia, there have only been 4 schools over the last 5 years that have brought in multiple 5-star wide receivers. Clemson's done it like 4 times. It may be 3 and 1 commit. But it's like they've had like 4 5-star receivers of that time. Alabama's had 2, LSU's had 2, and Southern Cal, USC's had 2. So there have only been 4 schools over the last 5 recruiting cycles, counting 2019, that have had multiple 5-star guys. Georgia's looking to become the 5th there by bringing in D-Rob as a transfer and then signing Jaden Hazelwood, Dominic Blaylock. So that's pretty rarefied air. I don't have to tell you, of the 4 that have done this, 2 of them, Clemson and Alabama, are fixtures in the college football playoff. So that is a really really good place to be when it comes to that. All right, over to Facebook for a moment. We'll get ready to get out of here. JY says, BA, I put my job on the line every day to watch D&D. He goes, LOL, it's worth it. Well, listen, we love giving you a break from work. We like, sneaking over, putting the earbuds in, pulling up on the laptop or whatever. I've always said that maybe we should design our broadcast interface so that it sort of looks like an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe we'll see if we can get our tech people on that to like sort of make the broadcast have a mode where you can go like Excel spreadsheet so that people can't tell exactly what you're doing. I think that's a really good idea. And then Mike Mazzell, let me make this the final comment for today because we're late. Mike says about Death Valley, where Ed Orgeron sort of talked it up for the game against LSU. Mike says, I believe we're going to quiet that stadium. And let me tell you something. As a fan, and I can only imagine what this must feel like as a coach and a player, it's probably even more empowering by magnitudes. But as a fan, when you go to these road games, and I've been lucky enough over the course of my life to go to a few of them, when you go to these road games and you see a rabid stadium turn stone quiet over the course of the game because of the way the road team, in this case Georgia's playing, that's about as fun as it gets right there. In a weird way, it's just as fun as seeing a home stadium get turned up louder and louder and louder because of the performance of the home team. Seeing Georgia be sort of spurred on by the Sanford Stadium crowd is really, really great. But seeing Georgia just take the air out of a balloon, it happened in Neyland Stadium last year. It happened, all the other half of the Gator Bowl with the Florida fans. I love just seeing Georgia deflate a stadium on the road. That is a cool experience for a fan, and maybe Georgia does get a chance to do that in October in Death Valley. It's fun to think about. SEC Media Days being here just makes you that much more excited, that much closer to the start of the season. We're obviously going to be here every day covering it for you and talking about it. Thanks for being here with us. We're back live tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for another episode of the program. Podcast up here right away from Athens area. We'd love to have you check us out on the radio as well on 960 The Ref. You can hit me up on Twitter at DawgNation Daily. We can chat some more there. As I said, I haven't been super active on Twitter as of late, but I'm looking forward to kind of getting back in on that conversation here pretty soon. Just glad you're with us. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily Live. It's presented by Marco's Pizza.